Man the harpoons, because we're unleashing the Kraken in this episode of the Gear Guide. So we got our hands on one of the new CRB rifles early to see if the new Krytac AG series is going to live up to the hopes and the expectations for a brand new top-tier airsoft brand. Now, in case you're wondering who the heck Krytac is, it's a new California-based airsoft company that's part of the Chris firearms family. Yep, that is the Chris, the guys that make the Vector. So you know this is probably the first firearms company that I know of, at least, that has moved officially into airsoft manufacturing. But enough on the history lesson, let's get to it and see what the CRB is all about. Now, the second you pull the AG out of the box, you know there is something just different about it. And the first thing that jumped out to us is the external look of this. There's this really awesome, like satiny, like matte black finish of it, and it covers all the metal parts. And considering that metal is 90% of the build of this AEG, it just looks great and uniform. And unlike some other AEGs where the finish is a little different on the rail than on the body, this one is the same all over. There's just, I don't know, it's hard to explain. It just looks really good. But paint is one thing. What about the build? Well, there's plenty of meat on the bone here too. So starting with the front, you get this great Defiance TR110 rail. Now it's a key mod rail, it's 10 inches long, and it's really oval in shape. So what you get is this narrow cross section. It's tall, but thin, so it's really comfortable in your hand. And it's something I really like. You can tell they put some work into this, and there's so many great little minute details on the rail that make it really interesting, like the front here and then toward the back. They just didn't go with the standard rail, cut it off flush, and call it a day. And if you want to get this rail off, it actually comes off really easily. There's two screws right here on the bottom, Allen keys, and it slides right off because it's a free float barrel system. And underneath there, you've got a gas block and a gas tube. So they actually are paying attention to all the little details on the front end of the rifle. Now across the top of the handguard here, you get a 40-section Picatinny rail that extends all the way to the back, and up top of that are the included iron sights here front and rear, and they kind of went with the chop sight version here in the back, which you guys are familiar with, but they did improve the details on it as well. The receiver is solid, and there's not even a gap here on the side or any wobble found between the upper and the lower. And speaking of lowers, they didn't miss any details here either. There's actually an ambi fire selector that's on both sides, and for the right dominant guys, they did chop down the offside so it doesn't bite into your hand if you have it in semi-auto. And the logo, as well as all the markings here for fire selection and anything around the body and the receiver, are all etched in. I know some of the early prototypes they were looking at doing the white raised lettering, but I'm really glad they went with this recessed black etch. It just adds this real polished and finished look to the receiver. Now the pistol grip is also a really trim version, which feels more like a real M4 versus the real fat airsoft versions. And you also get included 300 round high cap that actually has a winding tool, a little hole in the side, so you're not going to get M4 mag thumb while you wind your high caps on this, which I think is a great little feature that they added in as well. Moving to the top, there's actually a functioning charging handle that locks back the bolt here to show the one-piece hop-up, which clicks into place for fine adjustments, and they even added number markings on it, which is something I really haven't seen in an M4 platform at all, with a little designation mark, so you actually can go, all right, I know I'm shooting .25s, I'm going to be at a 7.5. It actually clicks in between the numbers. Or if you move to 2s, you know you're going to be a 5 or 5.5. I thought that was such a fantastic little touch if you do use different BB weights depending on what spring you're putting in the gun. And to round it all out, the bolt release is functional as well, but Krytac's made it really longer travel. Some of these sit flush and you got to kind of push them hard to get the bolt. This one sticks out when it's locked back, actually a good amount, so a simple touch and it goes forward. It's just those little details that continue to impress me about the new Krytac rifle. And rounding out the back as we move past the included sling plate here is the custom Krytac retractable stock. Now it's their take on the 6-position M4 stock with some bonus features, including multiple sling attachment points. You get both a QD swivel here on the back as well as a strap attachment point. So with that, including the sling plate for like a QD, like the hook kind, you're gonna have a way to attach any sling you currently own without having to buy any aftermarket parts. And as you adjust the stock with this recessed little switch here, you can actually see the etched numbers here on the buffer tube through the hole on the top. A lot of AEG companies really overlook that. There's a couple that do it, and I love that idea because sometimes I want to quickly find my favorite number. I'm a 3 on almost all retractable stocks. So if I want to be able to look down and find my number, it makes it really simple. And we're not even done with the stock yet. They've added another great feature here too. On the actual stock adjustment button, they added these little wings. And if you guys have ever tried to get some of these crane stock style stocks off a buffer tube to get in there to actually service your gun or maybe extract a battery you put too far down in the buffer tube, these little wings make it so easy to reach in here, pull, and slide it right off. It's just those little tiny details I keep coming across when you're looking at the new Krytac rifle. And they also solved another issue on the inside, which is battery choice with these kind of stocks. Rather than stick with the single battery option, they give you two different kinds. Behind the rubber butt plate here, when you pop it off, you can run the traditional like nunchuck or 3-part butterfly battery down in the actual stock itself. Or because there's so much room here, you can put one of those small buffer tube type batteries right here, but not down in the buffer tube, so it sits vertical and you won't worry about pinching it or having to compete for fuse space back down in with the wiring. All right, so after all that talk on externals, I'm really glad you stuck with me because now it's time to see how the CRB performs. Oh, and we did forget to mention the CRB has a little secret on the inside. It has a built-in Mosfet, and we're not talking about a relay trigger or anything like that. This is actually a purpose-built Mosfet that's built right on the outside of the mech box in this special recessed cutout. But fear not, the whole mech box is actually V2 compatible Marui style. So anything you want to use, you can actually swap the mech box entirely out in this gun, or any parts are going to work. So just because you put a Mosfet in here doesn't mean you don't have full Marui 100% parts compatibility. But back to that Mosfet, it doesn't only just protect those trigger contacts, it also gives you a real clean and predictable trigger response when firing in both semi and full auto. You know, it's just hard to describe how it feels. It's responsive. It has that vibe, you know, when you know everything on the inside is just working together correctly, from the gears to the electrical system and, you know, everything in between. It's just all in sync. When you fire this, like I said, it just feels good. And that's something you don't normally get from a stock AEG, and only something you really find in professionally tuned airsoft guns. So when we strapped on our 11-120C LiPo on the Chrono Test, we were ready for some solid numbers, and we weren't disappointed. Clocking in around 365 to 370 FPS on a .2 gram Elite Force BB, it's right on par with FEEL or CQB limits, so this is gonna work pretty much everywhere. But if that's too high or a little too low for your field, you can dial it down or up any way you want to because of the quick change spring system. Now, when we moved over to rate of fire test, we saw a very zippy 22 rounds a second on that LiPo. That's way up there, and I think that's really thanks to the high torque motor they include in here. And because of this motor, we've actually seen the tests from Krytac themselves of them putting 150 meter per second spring in here, which you guys know is way above field limits for any gun out there, but it's kind of a testament to what this gun can handle. And when we start doing our internal review, which is going to be another video following this one, we're going to actually throw a big old beefy spring on here as well and see what we can do and see if we can break this thing. So all of that praise said, I wish there were a few things they did change on this. You know, nothing can be perfect. And the first was the lack of included rails. In fact, this rail right here is one we actually had to add after the fact, and they don't include any in the box. I love the key mod. I love the smoothness of the rail, and the fact that there are no rails on there makes it comfortable to hold. But for those of us that want to put a flashlight or a foregrip on there or something like that, we have to go third party and pick one up because there's not one in the box. The other thing too is this amazing custom flash hider. Now I went ahead and painted mine. It's normally bright orange, but it's plastic, and that really makes it so you can't remove it because they're permanently affixed for US regulations. So now you got to cut or chop this thing off and you lose this fantastic flash hider if you live in an area where you can take them off or paint them legally and you want to put a suppressor on. So if you ever want to go back, you lose this great feature. I just really wish they went with metal on it so you could take it off and put it back on and retain this fantastic custom look. But that aside, it's still a fantastic gun, and those two little things definitely, for me at least, don't detract from a reason to pick one of these up. There's just so many positives to the Krytac CRB that definitely overshadow those few minor wants and wishes. Bottom line, the devil is in the details, and the Krytac CRB is full of those details. And with solid performance to match the good looks, we really feel like the end result did live up to all the hype. So if you're in the market for a new high-end M4, check out the new Krytac CRB for a surprisingly moderate price of $325, considering what you get under the hood and outside at your favorite local or online authorized Krytac dealer starting August 2014. So guys, I'm curious, what do you think about guns with built-in MOSFETs? I think personally, it's gonna be something you're gonna see, especially with Krytac kind of driving the change. There's a few others out there in the market as well that are including actually full MOSFETs in their guns. But I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say, so hit me up in the comments and let me know what you think about MOSFETs and if it's worth having them in your AEG from the factory and not having to mess with aftermarkets. Plus, let me know what you guys think of Krytac and the fact that it's a new US-based airsoft company that just came out of nowhere, and it's part of a firearms company. So what do you think is going to happen there with Krytac and the Chris ownership of Krytac and what we're going to see from their lineup? Of course, you guys know also Chris does Defiance, which is who makes this rail right here actually, and also Sphinx, which makes the Sphinx pistol. So let me know in the comments below. Well guys, that's it for this episode of the Gear Guide. We're gonna go reload our harpoons because there's a white whale out there that has our name on it.